Hello, everybody, and a huge welcome back to the Travel Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Gemma Zinyama, founder of Travel Insights AI, where we share real stories and honest perspectives from leaders shaping the future of travel. Today, I am joined by James from Untamed Borders. James, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Gemma. It's great to see you again.
Brilliant. So I've actually been looking forward to this conversation because what you do actually sits in a part of travel that many people are really curious about, but kind of fully don't understand. So I want to say up front, this episode is very much entry level guide for our listeners. This isn't about sensationalism or adrenaline. It's really about understanding the realities, the logistics and the motivations behind travel to places that most people never consider. So to start us off, could you briefly introduce yourself and explain what Untamed Borders actually does?
Yeah, I'm James. I'm James Willcox. I'm one of the founders of the travel company called Untamed Borders, and we've been doing this since 2008. We arrange travel across the Middle East, across Central Asia, across parts of North, East, and Central Africa. The reason, I guess, if we're famous for anything, or if we're known for anything, it's for taking people to areas where there's an increased security risk, or at least a perceived security risk. We see ourselves as being able to guide people to places they would struggle to do independently. And that can be because there's an increased security risk, or at least a perceived one in the region. It can be because permits and visas are hard, or it can be because logistics are hard. As you know, it could be a desert or a mountain and people need logistical support. So that's how we see what we do.
Okay. So when people hear destinations like Syria, Somalia, or Afghanistan, I find that they often jump straight to danger. But high risk travel can mean many things. So how do you define that?
Well, I think it's understandable that because people's information about different countries is based on what they've seen. Spending, well, a few people are, but most people aren't spending every week looking for an encyclopedia or history about every single country in the world. There's over 200 countries. And so their general impression of somewhere like the Maldives is about tourism. And their general impression of somewhere like Somalia or Afghanistan or Syria is about conflict, perhaps extremism and things that are in the news. But of course, there's a lot more going on in both of those countries. There's a lot more going on in the Maldives than just tourism. People get up every day and fall in love and go to work and do all the normal things people do. And that's exactly the same in Somalia or Afghanistan, Syria. So there is a wealth of things in those countries that is beyond what what people's first impressions might be.
Yeah. So I think, there are a few things that people misunderstand about travel to these regions. Is the risk usually physical or bureaucratic or just a mix?
Look, when we look at risk, like any tour operator, we have to run risk assessments on the countries we work in. And like any tour operator, well, any kind of adventure tour operator, the biggest risk you're going to face is a road traffic accident. And that doesn't matter whether you're organizing something in Afghanistan, you're organizing in Somalia, or you're organizing a bus tour in Germany. I mean, when we worked in Afghanistan at the height of the insurgency, so towards 2020 or 2020 or 2019, there were more people killed and injured on the roads in Afghanistan than due to the insurgency. In fact, there were more people killed on the roads in Germany than there were killed in Afghanistan each year during the insurgency. So we look at risk holistically. So of course, that's not trying to be flippant, but we have to look at everything from the safety of the vehicles to the drivers to the accommodation we use to perhaps restaurants. But we also look at perhaps other risks from, insurgency groups, other risks of the fact that the geopolitical situation can change in those countries. No amount of work we have to do with our risk assessments, but essentially it's the same as any tour operator.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I would be asking you, what makes this travel possible? Because I think this is where the part where listeners are really curious about the logistics. When someone travels with Untamed Borders, what are the things you're handling that they simply couldn't do alone?
I mean, sometimes it is permissions when you say you can't do it alone. I mean,
Like maybe visas,
it's be
permits.
very difficult. Yeah, it'll be very difficult for someone to do alone if they haven't got experience of working in a place that perhaps has a high risk. The first thing we do is the parts we work in. So we don't work in every part of every country. You're talking about Somalia. We work in relatively small sections of the country. We work in cities in the south and the centre, including Mogadishu, and then we work in Somaliland, which is a breakaway part of a de facto independent part of Somalia, and we work in a certain specific parts of Puntland. So part of it is deciding where we're going to go and where we don't go, because that has a huge effect on it. The
Okay.
secondly is how we work. What are the risks? Are there risks of an opportunist attack? Are there risks of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Well, how can we reduce the risk of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Do we avoid government buildings? Do we avoid, at the moment in Afghanistan, for example, we avoid going into we staying in hotels where there are Chinese workers staying because they have a lot of mining contracts with the Taliban, and anti-government groups sometimes target them. So sometimes about what we do and what we don't do are the main things to reduce risk.
Okay. So there must be like quite a lot of security planning, without going into tactics,
Mm.
just around these trips. And do you have like remote support and contingencies in place?
I mean, we have an emergency plan. I think any tour operator working in another country would have some sort of emergency plan. If something happens, what do you do? If someone is injured, if someone is hurt, and absolutely. So we have our emergency planning. We're probably a company that has to use that emergency planning more than anyone else because things change. We have to inform guests about changing. We sometimes have to change itineraries, or we sometimes even have to cancel trips to the whole country. So absolutely, we have itineraries, emergency plans.
So I guess from the outside, it might look like a trip, but from what I've learned, it's like a closer to a complex operation. So it sounds like you really do it calm and professionally without drama. I think I'd be flapping all over the place.
I mean, look, the visit, most of the places we go, as you said, the guests go, and a lot of the time the impression is if they did have concerns beforehand, that they're like, oh, right, it just felt okay. Everything felt normal. And most of the times, the places we work, it is normal most of the time. I mean, that's the whole point. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to work there. But it's for us to try and reduce the risk of if there was something to change, that we would be involved in it.
Okay. And why do people choose these destinations?
It's a good question. I think we look at it a lot because obviously we have to market, we have to try and understand our guests, and we have to understand their sort of motivation. I got thinking about this a bit during sort of lockdown, and I actually did a small sort of series of sort of Instagram chats with some of our guests from different backgrounds and different things. And one of the things was about the kind of motivation. And I think one thing that comes across with almost everyone we work with is that by going to a country that doesn't have a huge tourism infrastructure, that isn't seen, or a region that isn't seen, your experience isn't seen through the prism of tourism. So when you go there, you have what's more like an authentic experience. I mean, an example I always give in Jordan, near Petra, there's a town, I think it's called Wadi Musa. I always forget the name, but essentially that town exists because of the fact there's tourists visiting Petra. So everything you do in that town is pretty much seen through the prism of tourism. Everybody working there is running hotels and restaurants and things like that, and that's absolutely fine. That's the experience you're getting. But if you're going to see some incredible things like Shabam, this skyscrapers in Yemen, or you're seeing the minaret of Jam in the middle of Afghanistan, the world's second highest medieval minaret, or you're going to Syria and seeing maybe the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, or you're wandering around Damascus, you're seeing something that is really just functioning as something that's happening sort of naturally without there being this kind of tourism prism to see through. And I think that's partly what drives people back is they're getting this really kind of authentic experience and seeing amazing places. And I think that's one of the biggest draws. And it's not because of a kind of adrenaline or a danger or something like that. It's almost the opposite, that they want to see something which is just in its kind of natural state.
Yeah. It's so funny that you've just said adrenaline because I think that's often the stereotype that these people have that these travelers are thrill seekers or complete adrenaline junkies when that doesn't actually feel accurate. So you've really explained that well. Could you say what actually motivates your clients?
Well, I think I sort of touched on that earlier, but I think another thing that motivates is people do like on their holidays to have a little bit of an adventure. I mean, when people come back from their holidays, they often talk about the thing that didn't quite work out, right? The mishap, the adventure, this kind of thing. And so by going to a place where, things are not as neatly tied up as they might be in parts of Europe or the global north. They get to have a bit of an adventure. And it's a bit of a sort of old fashioned term, or not that exciting, but not that, I don't know. It's a bit of an old-fashioned term to say we're going and having a bit of an adventure, but it is. I mean, any trip that we do, I mean, even when it goes smoothly, there are little things that you see, little things that happen that are not, not completely planned. And I think that's part of it as well. So it's not really like an adrenaline rush, but it is to have an experience and a bit of an adventure, and getting slightly out of your, not necessarily out of your comfort zone, because we have a lot of travelers that have been to a lot of parts of the world, but certainly out of their normal routine.
Yeah, I think I like the part of, the cultural aspect, the history, the cultural connection as well, and being able to come back with some storytelling and perspective, because I do feel in this day and age, not to knock it, because I am a fly and flop girl and with my family, but we've lost that sense of authenticity. Everything seems to be a bit more curated and a bit more perfect these days. So, I'm sure this area is growing, to audiences that wouldn't have maybe considered it before. So, yeah, look, it definitely sounds less risk taking and more meaningful. I just wanted to move on and talk about, ethics, responsibility, and maybe storytelling, because there's also an ethical layer here, traveling to places that are often misrepresented or actually misunderstood. How do you think about that responsibility to like local suppliers, local people? Do you tell their stories? Do you try and engage with the businesses and use local as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, we as a company, we have these kind of four commitments. We sat down a while ago, like what do we stand for as a company? And so one of them is a commitment to adventure, to doing adventurous trips, doing things that our guests find engaging. One's an environmental commitment, one's a safety commitment, and one is a commitment to the communities that we work in. And so part of that is, yes, is using, locally managed, like, either individual guides or small operators or locally owned accommodation. And in a lot of countries, we have to do that because there aren't any other options. I mean, because of economic sanctions and things like that, there are no big chain hotels in some of the countries in Mogadishu. So we have to work with locally owned organizations. But we've done other things as well. I mean, we have a commitment to trying to employ both male and female tour guides. I mean, we were the first company to employ a female tour guide in Afghanistan, and she had to leave when the Taliban took over, and she now does virtual tours for us from where she lives in Italy. We also involved in staging marathon races in Somaliland and in Afghanistan, and they were both the first and to date the only mixed gender sporting events ever held in those countries. And we also were involved in a female mountain guide training project in Tajikistan. So we try and have, that's one of the things we do beyond, trying to access, because our guests want to know what's going on in the countries. I mean, I feel like compared to most tourists, the tourists that we have, the geopolitics is part of what they're interested in. So they want to know what somebody's doing in Afghanistan, what people's life is. So we're always trying to introduce people and try and allow people to understand what's going on in the communities. If we're in a rural area, talk to the farmers and what they're doing. If we're in an urban area, and people are usually quite willing to chat, because for them it's unusual to see international people as tourists. And so having that connection and interaction is definitely something we try and do. But I think as I said before, we're also trying, certainly with, I wouldn't say the number of tour guides, especially where we work, is equal, but we certainly try and employ female tour guides in every country we work in.
Okay, that's really good to hear. I also think it's important to talk about who this type of travel isn't for. I mean, do you come across people that sort of think this is for them and you're like, look, do you turn away people?
There's two questions there. I mean, look, whenever anyone that's doing sort of, customer, you're offering a service to a customer. Sometimes what you provide and what they expected or what they want doesn't quite match up. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I feel that sometimes we've had people on trips and it wasn't quite for them. We always try and discuss what the trip is, but sometimes that just isn't there. As far as But generally not. I think generally it's sometimes it's quite often the other way around, because a lot of the places we go, people don't really have an expectation. They don't really know what it's going to be like. And so a lot of the time it's hard to not meet that expectation if no one really understands what it's actually going to be like.
Understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So actually that's probably less of a problem than with some other tour companies. As far as turning people away, yeah, I mean, like I think a lot of tour companies, we have people that we've guided that we wouldn't guide again, and that can be for different reasons. Or we might have people that we would guide on a private trip, but we wouldn't guide on a group trip because we just feel that they would deteriorate from the group. It's pretty rare. And yeah, occasionally we have people, their requests, because we do, as well as the groups we guide a lot of private people on individual trips. And that can be tourists, but it can also be professional people. We've guided documentary teams. We guided Michael Palin on a documentary to Iraq. We put on a concert for Joss Stone, the singer Joss Stone, in Afghanistan a few years ago. So we've done a number of different things with professional people, but sometimes we get requests that just don't feel like what we want to do. You know, as I said, the geopolitics is part of what we do, but if somebody comes and all of what they're asking to do just feels like I've forgotten the word, it's a bit early in the morning. It's just a bit sort of voyeuristic, perhaps. You know, they just
Okay.
want to see
A bit
places
of
where
a
there
red
has been
flag.
conflict. Yeah, it's a bit of a red flag. I mean, there could be a good reason. There could be a researcher. There could be, I think we've got a couple who want to go to Iraq. Their son, unfortunately, died in Iraq during the Gulf War. They're from America. So one of the things they want to do is to see where, you know, the town and the area that he was from. And that makes perfect sense to us. You know, that makes sense. But if somebody just wanted to see sites from that conflict and nothing else, and there's no reason behind it, it would feel a bit uncomfortable for us. So yes, there are some questions but if somebody wanted to see one particular conflict because they've got an interest in it, but they also want to see everything else in the country, that makes sense because that is
Yeah.
part of the history of the country. I feel like for us, it just has to be part of a larger trip rather than just the full focus of it.
No, I do understand. It's almost like you kind of need to understand someone's intentions and the kind of mindset they have to know if they're a good fit. Yeah. No, that is obviously really, really interesting. So, I've got a question that I call the magic wand, especially in your business. If you could wave a magic wand and fix one issue, in your realm, whether it be business, how you find people, or something to do with tech, anything at all, what would it be?
That's a good question. It's a good question, especially because where we work, there's so many things that don't fit into like a normal box. Like when we look for a reservation system, like we've got one that's slightly sort of tailored to us because we have to change things so often. We have to change routes. We have to change information that we give people. It's not like someone's going on a wine tasting trip to Italy and you send the same information out. It's the same information out you sent in 1980. Like it can change all the time. And so I guess part of what we do is, and part of the reason why there's not so many people operating in our space is it's changing all the time. It's really hard. It's really hard to scale it in that kind of way because it's constantly changing and because you're constantly having to do things. I mean, the one that I would wave, and this sounds like, you know, something, some sort of flower child from the 60s, which would probably put me out of work, would be that there was a lot more stability and peace in the regions that we work in. Because, you know, we've been doing this for nearly 20 years. And, you know, we've seen a lot of people that we work with go through some really tough times. On the flip side of that, we've also worked with lots of people who were going through tough times and now they can work in tourism again because their country has become more stable. So I can't really think of one piece of tech, it's a really good question. One piece of information that would do it. I think it would be like a sort of reservation system that would somehow allow us to seamlessly fit all of the changes that happen all the time in, but I don't think that really exists. Maybe with AI it could. Maybe we'd just be
Necessarily.
able to say we need this system. This is all of the stuff that we do, and it'll just come up with a system for us. So yeah, that would be it. It would be to have an AI generated reservation system that we could create. There you go. There's one for
That's
you.
interesting.
There's one.
Never say never. It
Yeah.
wouldn't. Yeah, no, listen, we can always definitely explore it. Even it's piqued my interest. So yeah, let's see where technology is going to take
I'm
us.
wondering now if it already does, that I can actually find an AI. I can get something to build us one. Anyway,
Yeah.
you've given me some inspiration, Gemma.
So can I ask, what have you got planned? What are, you know, Untamed Borders plans for 2026? Two questions. And then what is your favorite country of the places that you operate in, actually?
So what have we got in? So March, I wrote a guidebook for a guidebook company called Brat that are pretty big in the UK on Afghanistan. It's the first mainstream guidebook to be written on Afghanistan for 20 years. So the launch of that is in Stanford Bookshop in Covent Garden in March. 12th of March. We as a company, we've got some new trips this year where we're doing trips to the World Nomad Games in Kyrgyzstan. So all these different nomadic communities across the Eurasian steppe and other parts of the world come together to play sort of traditional games. That's going to be really cool. Yeah, we're just sort of expanding slowly some of our trips. I mean, we're hoping to do more stuff in the Sahel. So the situation at the moment in Mali and Burkina Faso and are not great, but we're hoping that was what we were hoping to sort of expand into. And your second question was,
Where's your favorite place?
I
Will
mean,
someone be surprised when you say where it is?
one the thing is, I don't. It's like with films or music. It's as if you have. I've never really gone for like having this kind of top five, top 10, because as soon as you do that, as soon as you have a really amazing experience, oh, am I going? Where am I going to measure this up to? You know, where I would want to go with do stuff with my son is going to be quite different to where I might want to do something with my partner, which is going to be quite different what I might want to do for work. But I would definitely say Afghanistan is a huge, I'm hugely attached to Afghanistan. So it was one of the places that we first started working. Untamed Borders first started working in Pakistan and Afghanistan. This is sort of 2007, so nearly 20 years ago. I've been there at least once, but sometimes 2 or 3 times a year since then. I've written the guidebook. We put on the marathon there. I said we employed the first female tour guide. We've done lots of different sort of tourism development because there was no real tourism development there. So we sort of helped sort of introduce different aspects to it. We helped develop skiing in Afghanistan. So I've done involved in a load of different stuff there. So I think if there's one country that I'm probably most tied to, it would be Afghanistan.
Great. James, oh my goodness, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. And I also genuinely love how grounded and thoughtful your approach was. So it really challenges the assumptions, people make about this part of travel. So I've learned so much. Thank you so much for your time. Before we finish, and for anyone listening who's simply curious, what is the best place to learn about Untamed Borders?
So all of our social media, so Instagram, Twitter, X, and Facebook, you can go at Untamed Borders. The website is www.untamedborders.com. Email the team at info@untamedborders. You can find all about us there. Sign up to the newsletter. We send out information, even if you don't want to go on any of our trips. There's different films about the areas that we work in. And actually, there was recently a film. It's out now on the Olympic channel. So it's for free. It's called Champions of the Golden Valley. I was one of the producers on it, and Malala, if you remember Malala from Pakistan,
Yes.
she's also one of the producers of it. It's about the skiing community in Afghanistan.
Well,
So as well as even if you don't want to come and know about any of our trips, there's interesting stuff that we do that you might find useful. So contact us on any of those.
that's great. James, thank you so much for your time. And to everyone listening, please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, Travel Insights AI. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, Gemma.